Hello, it's Bodders here, and I'm joined by Matt.
Hello, Bodders.
Hello. And we're about to talk about the new Total War game, but if you're new to the channel, please don't forget to subscribe and ring the special magic bronze bell.
I like that you've decided it's bronze.
And magical.
That too, yeah.
But it's bronze because we're going to the Bronze Age, aren't we?
Yeah, that's what a great segue that is.
Thank you very much, thank you. That's why I get the big bucks. Right, Matt, can you tell us everything you know about the new Total War, please? Starting with its full name.
So it's a Total War Saga Troy, which gives you some clue as to where it's set and the setting itself. And this is
Troy Baker.
Troy Baker, that's inside Troy Baker.
Okay, good, like inner space. Sorry, I digress.
It's maybe the only game that he's not in. So this is the furthest back in time that we've ever gone with a Total War game. So we're going right back to the 13th century BC, to the late Bronze Age. And that kind of brings with it a load of quite interesting kind of gameplay and mechanical things that we'll talk about in a bit. But also, like, it's crucial because it's it's the Hellenic Wars, it's Homer's Iliad, it's the Age of Heroes essentially. So a setting that I think loads of us are really familiar with. But Creative Assembly's take on it is particularly interesting because it's sort of myths and legends and monsters and gods, all framed through a historical lens. So if you're used to kind of Three Kingdoms, or if you're used to Warhammer and the kind of big, kind of bombastic elements that come with that, the slightly sort of larger than life stuff, there are elements of that, but it's kind of scaled down to feel more realistic.
That's great, yeah, for the sort of history purists among us. That sounds like, so a move away from magical powers and those kind of abilities and buffs in favour of things that are realistic, more like inspiration things. Yeah,
totally. The way they've blended it is really, really interesting. So one of the really good examples of that is with the Minotaur, which is obviously like a mythical beast that everyone knows about. But in this context, it's a real person, like a huge, great big guy who wears a bull's head. So he is massively powerful, but he's not a monster. He's just a guy, and they've done it with Centaur as well, which is another special unit. And that's kind of the sort of the thing they're doing all throughout. So things like God's Favour, for example, there are gods in it, and people worship gods. And those gods can have an effect on what happens in the game, but it's almost like a placebo effect. So if you believe hard enough that the Poseidon is helping your trip across the ocean, then maybe it will help in real life, which is kind of a really interesting take on it. And also it kind of makes it feel more realistic.
That's great. As I say, really appeals to the purist in me. So you talk about the Minotaur, obviously the sort of plethora, the pantheon, if you will.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's a Greek word. Of legendary characters, gods and monsters and stuff. Doesn't stop there. So any other examples you can share with us?
Oh yeah. So like your armies are kind of all built around these legendary characters, and the two that they focused on during our presentation were Achilles and Hector.
Yep.
And they've kind of done a really good job of reflecting how those characters are different on the campaign map and in the battle as well. So Achilles is obviously like a legendary warrior. He's probably the most powerful fighter in the game. But the downside to that is that he's really, really hot-blooded and prone to bouts of uncontrollable fury.
That sounds like you, man.
Exactly like me. Yeah, quite. We are kindred spirits.
Yeah, it's like put milk in his Earl Grey, you're in trouble. Sorry, anyway, I digress.
Flipping the tables. And his units reflect those characteristics as well. And on the other side, you have Hector, literally on the other side, who's a more defensive unit, and his campaign buffs are more about diplomacy and resources and things like that. So, these sort of legendary characters are kind of refitted essentially to a real-world setting, and the characteristics you see in these legendary texts are reflected on the campaign map.
Amazing. And speaking of the campaign, how is it different?
I mean, the first thing is that it's just beautiful. It's like one of the most striking campaign maps I think we've seen. And the way that they've kind of done the sort of the fog of war essentially is really, really interesting. So the stuff you can't see is covered with like excerpts from the Iliad and mythological art and things like that. And as that burns away, the real world takes its place, which is a really nice touch, and also a really, really like clear way of representing what we were saying earlier about like the blend of myth and reality. One of the things that we're really keen to point out is just how nice the water looks in the campaign map. It's like that looks exactly like
I like well rendered water.
It's gorgeous. Yeah. It makes you want to take a dip. But the biggest thing is the change in the way the economy works. So this is pre-money essentially. So this is a barter economy, and you're trading resources, gold, stone, wood, food, things like that.
That's interesting.
And all of those things, their value varies depending on their availability. So you'll be trading food and wood early on, and gold is the ultimate thing that you'll trade later on in the game.
I mean, that all sounds fantastic, Matt, but can you tell me how the actual battles are different? Let's get into the war, totally.
We are missing the war from Total War, and in this case we are literally missing it because there isn't actually any footage of this yet, but I think it's coming soon. The big difference here is that this is set during an era where cavalry wasn't as prevalent.
Yep.
So the thing they've done to get around that is increase the amount of variety between the infantry units. So you have light, medium and heavy infantry. They all work differently. Some of them have the ability to switch weapons mid-fight, which gives them sort of a greater degree of tactical flexibility. And things like light infantry as well can get through the new terrain settings. So there are things like mud, which will impede heavy infantry, whereas light infantry isn't impeded by that. On the face of it, it looks like it's a less broad game because it's primarily infantry, but they've done a really, really good, interesting job of kind of highlighting the differences between those types of units to kind of get around the fact that cavalry isn't really as much of a thing here.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds amazing. Can't wait to see some of the battle gameplay as soon as we can. More importantly, though, when's it actually out?
It is out in 2020, so not that long to wait.
Oh, fantastic. Just the other side of Christmas. Thank you very much, Matt. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so, and hit that notification bell. And please, of course, if you have any questions about the new Total War, leave them in the comments below.